All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to give folks a few moments to join, and then I'll give a quick intro before we get started with today's webinar. All right, cool. Looks like we've got a good amount of folks who are jumping in now, so I'll go ahead and get started with our intro. I'll share some links to anything that I cover during that in the chat so that if anyone is joining a bit late and they miss the beginning portion, you can grab some of those links, and you can also schedule a meeting with Acelab to review anything that we discuss at this top part. But just want to start off with a quick intro about Acelab. So my name is Bo. I'm Acelab's Director of Partner Success. We're helping out with hosting today's event with Arborwood. So we've got Andrew on here today to talk about understanding thermally modified wood. Super excited for this presentation. I think it's a really relevant topic, so we're really excited to learn more about their products today. We do have CEU AIA credits available for this event, so we did ask for AIA numbers upon registration. I will also send over a form momentarily in the chat where you can submit your AIA number in case you forgot to during registration, and you can also request a certificate through that form as well. Before we get started with the CEU portion of today's event, I'm going to give a quick tour of Acelab, show you how you can discover Arborwood's products on Acelab and get in touch with them after today's webinar in case you have any follow-up questions. And then from there, we'll go ahead and get started with today's presentation. All right, so I'll share my screen here. So anyone who has registered for this webinar automatically has a free Acelab account made for them. So if you've been to some of our webinars before, you've hopefully checked out Acelab's platform. If you haven't yet, I'll put up a short poll after this quick demo where you can let us know if you're interested in setting up a quick 15-minute meeting with someone from our team to learn some more about how to use this for your projects. But today I just want to show you guys a quick search. So we actually recently did a really big update to our search tools, added a ton more products. So even if you've explored this in the past, it's a great time to jump back in and see some of the new stuff we've been adding over here. But if you want to do some research on products, you can just hover over products here, head to any of these categories. I'm going to do cladding today. Select siding, and we'll also ask you to nest this under a project. I've got a ton of projects since I'm using this for demos all the time. I'm just going to use my general research project today, which everyone automatically has created for them. And then I'm going to come down here and select thermally modified wood. You can also skip any of these questions that might not be relevant. So I'll just kind of breeze through these. There's also always the option to get in touch with someone from Acelab's team if you're looking for some more support on your product research. Skip and show results. And from here, we can see an overview of all of the great thermally modified wood products that we have. Got Arborwood right at the top here. Since they start with an A, that's awesome. I'm going to add a few of these to a compare folder. And I'm also going to show you something that you can do as an easy way to get in touch with manufacturers. You can pop these results into a manufacturer view. And this will give you a little bit more information about the manufacturer, where they're located, where they ship to, as well as this direct contact button. So you can reach out right from this page if you've got some questions and you want to learn some more about their products. And as I was saving those products, you can see that they were getting added to this little table down here. So I'm going to quickly show you what that does. Go ahead and click compare. Anytime you save a product, it automatically saves it into this handy comparison table, so that you're able to see an overview of the product information and really compare things apples to apples. All right, so now I'm on my cladding shortlist, and scrolling down here, we can see you have the ability to add comments, add documents. You can see an overview of the product information, design options, dimensions, and if there's information, you can also request that from Acelab's team or from the manufacturer themselves. All right, and then the last thing I want to share with you all today is just a little preview of what's to come. So we have been working on a bunch of updates to Acelab's platform, and we are getting ready to launch a kind of version 2. So this is going to be launched to some beta testers fairly soon, I believe at the end of this month. So it's really just like an enhanced way to store all of your product data in one place. We're calling this the schedules planner. We're also working on a spec planner as well. It's going to have a lot more functionality, ability to export and import data, as well as, collaborate and invite your team members so that everybody has access to the firm's product library data. So if you're interested in learning some more about the new launches that we have coming or how to use Acelab for your projects, I will put up a demo for some time with our team. All right, cool. And then other than that, I just want to encourage folks to please feel free to submit questions throughout today's presentation. We've got the Q&A box there where you can submit any questions or comments. And that will be a great way to make sure we have a record of your questions. So we'll get to as many as we can live today. If we don't get to your question live, we'll have a record of that so we can follow up after today's event. All right, perfect. Andrew, whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away for the CEU portion. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bo. And welcome, everyone. For today's presentation, we're going to keep it pretty broad and general, high level about thermally modified wood. And the content will focus on our CEU presentation. But I'll also highlight some of the important aspects of the Arbor Wood brand along the way. It's about 45 minutes, so I'll just jump right into it and hopefully have plenty of time at the end for questions. So let's go. I'll share my screen right now. All right. So as you saw in the invite and as you see on screen right now, this is really a broad conversation about thermally modified wood with the goals of just helping you better understand what this new innovative approach to wood technology is and how you can utilize it in your projects moving forward. And as Bo mentioned, it is accredited with AIA, so send over your membership numbers and we'll make sure you guys get credit for being here. So as I mentioned, the goal here is that we'll go all the way back, explore the history around thermal modification and its origin story, understand the benefits and purpose for thermally modifying wood and what that can mean for a project, and then understand how you guys can start to work this into your future or any ongoing projects right now. We'll also talk about the sustainability. That's a newer portion that's been added to the CEU as more and more certifications and requirements are becoming popular. So to get started, obviously many of us, if not all of us, should be very familiar with wood. It is really the longest standing building material since the dawn of time. It is natural, it's renewable, it's easy to work with, and it's readily available all over the world. Really makes sense for why it's been so popular. However, wood in its time has been challenged by its overall durability, decay, maintenance, inconsistent moisture content, and availability of high quality wood. Wood does not last forever when compared with other materials that are available today. However, when treated in the right way, it can last a very long time. And there's been just a variety of processes and developments over the last 30 years that have all really aimed at trying to enhance the performance and durability of wood to essentially make it last longer, make it move less. And what we'll explore today is a number of those processes, but focusing mostly on the thermal modification of wood. So there's a number of processes that can have been developed over the years to increase wood's performance, longevity, durability. The most popular that many of you are probably familiar with is chemical treatment of wood. So we talk about pressure-treated lumber. These are the actual impregnation of the wood fibers with a chemical that is going to actively help that wood last longer. It's going to fight off the water that's ultimately going to degrade the wood, mold, fungal decay, rot, those types of things. But ultimately, we're using a chemical that will eventually leach out into the world, which could get into the ground and groundwater, and ultimately isn't a healthy and sustainable way to treat wood. However, it is effective. Another method that is kind of a fun one is wood burning or charring. This goes way back to some very early civilizations. You've maybe heard of the Japanese art of shusugi-ban or yakasugi, which involves using open flame to actually actively char the wood surface and create a carbon layer that actually protects the wood from water and other decay. It's now being used for both function but also aesthetic. You can obviously paint or stain wood products. This is still very popular today. It does, again, both a performance and an aesthetic look, and provides basically a protective layer that encompasses the fibers of the wood to protect it from our two main decaying agents, which are UV from the sun and water, which can ultimately just degrade the cells of the wood. And then the final one, which will be our focus for the day, is thermal modification. This is about a 40-year-old process. We'll get into the development story and where it started. But ultimately, it's as simple as using heat to change the way that wood interacts with water by changing the cellular structure. But it is a chemical-free process. It uses nothing but heat and steam, and ultimately increases the dimensional stability, the durability, and the longevity of a natural wood product. There's a few approaches that fall under the general umbrella of thermal modification. The one that we'll focus on here is number 4. It's the thermo-wood modification. But the other 3 that you see all have a varying degree of different temperatures, different environments that the wood is going to be put in, different additives, whether it's nitrogen or oil, or adding actual moisture in, drying it, heating again to cure that wood. But what we're going to focus on for the remainder of the presentation is going to be the thermo-wood modification, which is really, as I mentioned, it's nothing but heat and steam in an oxygen-starved environment in order to transform the wood. So this process is chemical-free, uses nothing but heat and steam, and really what it does is it modifies the cellular structure of the wood. So if you were to look at a piece of non-thermally modified wood, and this might be kind of small, but I have a couple examples here. This is a piece of thermally modified or non-thermally modified North American white ash. As you can see, it's very white or blonde in texture, color, and it has not undergone thermal modification. It is a kiln-dried piece of lumber. This is that same piece modified, so you can see that the color changes. Most people, when they get it in their hands, see that it's actually much lighter because we're removing moisture content through the process of thermal modification. So this process of thermal modification takes place in a kiln, very similar to what kiln drying, standard kiln drying of lumber looks like. However, we're reaching temperatures much, much higher, where standard kiln drying is more about a long time and really room temperature, just making sure we're not fluctuating in temperature or humidity. In a thermal modification kiln, we're actually increasing that temperature to about 400 degrees. So in that process, what happens is the moisture content that is inside the wood, or quite simply the water that is in the wood's fibers, is going to be completely removed from the cell. And what that means is how that wood cell is going to interact with water moving forward has been fundamentally changed. That we used to get a little more scientific in our presentation, but we saw eyes glaze over. But I will just take 10 seconds here. There's 2 types of water that are inside a wood cell. There's what's called bound water and stored water. Stored water is, you can think of it as moving loosely throughout the cell. If you put a piece of wood in a dry environment, all of the stored water would eventually evaporate and you'd have a little loss in moisture content that way. but bound water is actually H2O molecules that are attached to the cell. And there's really no way to break that bond unless you heat it up to 400 degrees. So that's essentially the secret behind thermal modification, is we're heating it up to a temperature where we're actually creating a break in the bond of water and wood cell. And the beauty of it is after you break that bond can't happen again moving forward. So it essentially renders the wood hydrophobic. So moving forward, a piece of thermally modified wood is really going to resist water to a point where it can't go above 4 to 6% moisture content, which means it really can't rot out. It can't take on mold, fungal decay, and where in a typical piece of wood, if it gets a high moisture content and then the temperature increases or decreases drastically, or humidity goes up or humidity goes down, that's when you see the movement in wood, which is never a good thing, right? On a project, you want your wood to stay stable, you want it to stay true, you don't want it to warp, cup, buckle, any of these words that are swear words in the world of wood projects. So we're essentially releasing those and making sure that that's not going to be an issue moving forward. And it also takes on this beautiful, darker, rich tone across the board. That's always going to be a consistent no matter what, because that is essentially the sugars and the pitch and the sap getting caramelized throughout the process when it's cooked at 400 degrees. That's also a good thing because those sugars and pitch and sap are food sources for a lot of insects. And when the wood doesn't have those sources any longer, it becomes a lot less desirable to them. So they just end up avoiding it altogether. I mentioned the origins with Japanese Shisugiban, but also the Vikings were known to fire treat their ships before they set them out to sea. So they would, again, char the surface of the wood that would be obviously sitting in water and got a lot more performance from their woods that were abundantly available in Scandinavia and the Nordic countries. And ultimately, that is where the thermowood process was developed. So when you look at Finland, who is the country that developed this, it was in the early 90s, and their government said we have a lot of soft timber species that are really not viable for outdoor usage as natural product. And they wanted to find a way to bring value to that resource. So VTT was the research center that eventually developed thermal technology or thermal modification technology and applied that to a bunch of Nordic spruce, Nordic pine, and eventually developed a way to create these kilns that they could do any species of wood in. And it originated in Finland, but kind of took over Europe first. And as of now, thermal modification is really a global phenomenon, and taking hold in the US is really the next big growth opportunity for this technology, where we can start to replace some of those things like pressure treated lumber, composites, plastics, carbon or fiber, cement, anything that is really a chemical laden product, and switch to something that is more natural, sustainable, and ultimately a more cleaner product to use. A lot of times we get asked what species can be used for thermal modification. The beautiful thing is every species of timber on the face of the earth is a viable species for thermal modification. The challenge is every species has a different recipe of time and temperature. It's not just open the kiln, put the wood in, and it'll perform. There's a lot of R&D that goes into determining what temperature to cook at, how long to cook at, and how to dry the wood before it goes in, and then how to condition the wood after. So as you can imagine, that takes a lot of time and effort, but every year there's more species that are kind of developed in terms of a recipe. And that is largely shared among the industry because many of the thermal modifiers know that this is a technology or an innovation that ultimately is going to help the future of building materials. So it's really almost like an open source sharing among companies. The primary ones that we see, ash is currently the benchmark, the gold standard, if you will, for thermal modification. But ash as a species is really becoming less and less available. So there's a general shift to things like red oak, lots of pine varieties, spruce, hickory, hemlock, really any species or fiber of wood is viable. It just will take some time here for companies like Arborwood and other thermal modifiers to crack the code on some of the recipes. Another difference, just quickly on species and why it's so important that we can do any species of wood, is you've probably heard of some other modification technologies like from brands like Kebony and Akoya. They require the use of a softwood timber. Most of it is radiata pine grown in New Zealand because it's the only wood really soft enough for them to impregnate the wood with the chemicals. So it challenges the use of where they can source fiber, where they have to get it from, and then ultimately having to ship that over the world. Where with thermal modification, as long as you have a kiln and you have fiber in your area, you can create thermally modified wood. So there's two different processes. This is a good shot of what a kiln looks like for thermal modification. There's an open system and a closed system, and I'll just briefly go through some of the small differences. In these open system, you can think of it as an oven, right? It's a big open space. You can get a lot of wood in there, so volume of wood is very high. But ultimately, in an open system, it takes a lot longer. We have to have the wood in for 48 hours. So what we see as far as like a graph of what the temperature looks like, in the first phase where, after you get the wood in there, you're slowly increasing the temperature because you don't want to stress the wood too much and create cracks or checking. And then once we have the wood kind of brought up to a comfortable temperature is when we spike it and hit that 180 to 240 degrees Celsius, somewhere around that 400-degree average mark of Fahrenheit. And that is where the actual process of thermal modification happens. So you have to hit temperatures of that degree to actually start breaking down those bonds between the H2O and the wood's hemicellulose. At that point, we make sure that there's not a lot of oxygen in that environment, because then you could have a flash point. And what you don't want with high temperatures and wood is ignition. So the system creates and takes out oxygen so that that doesn't happen. And then in the final phase, the wood is actually cooled down very slowly, again, to not stress the wood. And then it's actually reconditioned with a little bit of steam. And that steam is able to kind of get that wood back to its 4 to 6% moisture content and lock it in. So it's a little easier to work with once it comes out of the kiln. On the flip side, we have what's called a closed system, where if the open system was an oven, the closed system is a pressure cooker. So you can see here in the image, this big cylinder is a closed system thermal modification kiln, and that door actually locks. It pressurizes the entire system. And when you pressurize the system, you don't have to hit temperatures as high, and you get it done in a lot faster time. So where the open system takes 48 hours to even longer than that, some of them take up to 5 days. The closed system can do an entire charge of wood in 8 to 12 hours. So you can really have a lot more volume go through it. However, the volume in each load is a lot smaller because it's a smaller vessel, but you have faster charge time. This is a newer technology too. We at Arborwood have invested in both, so we are testing different species in different kilns to just identify which will perform better, and ultimately see where the future of technology in this industry is going to go. So looking at the benefits, primarily the benefit is going to be stable wood. So by taking out the moisture content, you're going to have reduced expansion, contraction, and that board is going to just stay straight and true for its entirety. So people that want confidence in their job, and contractors love working with, because you get a load of wood to the job site and every board is just perfectly straight, and they're not going to have crooks or warps, and they're going to stay that way throughout the lifetime of that board. It's a lot less susceptible to water and absorption, which makes it less susceptible to mold, rot, and fungal decay, all things that are going to ultimately end the life of a board. It has an enhanced appearance. A lot of people love the darker, richer tones. That is actually a through color, so it goes through the entirety of the board and has that color throughout. So if you wanted to rip a board, plane a board, miter boards, it's really nice because it's going to have that same color throughout, and it's a very workable product. The process, as I talked about, is natural and chemical free. So it uses nothing but heat and steam. So once we get into the sustainability portion, you'll see that really when you have a product that is a natural material and there's nothing added to it, it makes it really easy to get it certified for things like LEED and Declare. It's red list free naturally because it has nothing else in it. And then finally, it's lightweight, because we're taking the moisture content down from 20 to 30% to 4%. The boards themselves actually get a lot lighter. They're easier to work with. And ultimately, on a job site, carrying boards around gets a lot easier. And then just looking at some comparisons in the realm of wood. So thermally modified ash is really our #1 species. It's our best hardwood option, and it is a class 1 in terms of durability. So it's expected to last over 25 years. We at Arborwood warranty for 20, but there's no reason, if you make sure you keep it clean, wash it, even if you add some sort of a penetrating oil to protect it, you could have a natural wood product that is going to last over 30 years. This is comparable to some tropical species like your teaks or your ipes. However, they're not part of the rainforests, and there's questions on the sustainability of sourcing those competitive products, where we know that we have an abundance of timber in the United States that's readily available and can be sourced responsibly from FSC managed forests. The pine, on the other side, is a softwood. So in a softwood, you're going to see mostly class 2, still around that 20-year mark, getting great performance from a pine board or a softwood species that was never really made to be used outdoors in an application, but now we have tons of applications that softwoods can be used for as long as they're thermally modified. When it comes to applications, as I said, any wood species can be modified. You can modify it in a variety of sizes, dimensions, thicknesses. So it's really awesome because it can be applied in many different ways. Primarily, it's used for exterior cladding or siding, soffits, fascia, a lot of decking, really popular flooring, and architectural millwork, as well as interior walls and ceilings. But it's also used for things like furniture and musical instruments, because it's so stable and it's not going to change with relative changes in humidity or temperature. There's a great story of a company Fender Guitars is using it as a way to make sure that bands that are touring and going from place to place, they don't have to tune the instruments as much because it's not changing with the relative changes in temperature and humidity. This is a short list. We've certainly seen other applications, but from the industry right now, it's primarily taken hold in the exterior and interior wood siding, decking, and dimensional millwork. As far as installation goes, really because it is a wood product and many people have had experiences with wood products, the installation traditionally runs the same for at least siding and decking, which is our main focus. We do have also some very innovative systems, including hidden fastening systems. So for a completely blind install, we have clip-in rail systems where the boards are actually grooved on the back and you just click the board into place. But if you are going to be installing this in a more traditional method, we do always recommend for any thermally modified wood that you pre-drill before adding your fastener, just because the wood is at 4 to 6% moisture content, making it a little more brittle than a board that might be at 18 to 30% moisture content. So when it comes to installation, there's nothing really that novel or new. We always recommend a rain screen installation, so making sure there's an air gap behind a siding or cladding project is always a must, just because if moisture were to get behind there, you want to have it with the ability to execute or leave the system and dry up over time. As far as finishes, you don't have to do anything to thermally modified wood. If you leave a piece of raw thermally modified wood out, as any natural wood product, it will weather to a silver gray patina over time. Some people love that look. Some people want to maintain the color. If you want to maintain the color tone of thermally modified wood, that's where you have to insert a oil or a water-based stain that has some sort of a pigment or a color. That color is ultimately going to act as your sunscreen for the wood, because what's going to weather it is going to be the UV as well as weather conditions. So water and UV are ultimately going to increase the speed at which thermally modified wood will weather or silver. So we have a number of different finishes that are viable. I mean, really anything you can do, anything from stain to a paint, water-based, oil-based. We've seen great performance from almost anything that people have used on it. So that's one thing to note in terms of the color. If you want to maintain color, you're going to be signing up for a maintenance schedule. What we typically see for like decking projects, every 2 years or so for a siding project and a vertical installation, you're going to see maybe every 3 to 5. And there's some oils that will actually build up in the fibers of the wood. So after your second or third time finishing it, you might actually be extending that maintenance interval by up to 5 to 10 years. So really it's a maintenance schedule that you're signing up for, but it can be made longer and longer with each application. This is just a visual representation of that color change. As I said, it's ultimately going to happen over the course of usually 12 to 18 months is what it'll take to go from brown to fully silver or fully weathered. That'll obviously change based on north facing, south facing, exposure, climate, temperature, those types of things. But in general, we will see a full weathering in about 2 years. All right. And then sustainability, this is a newer portion. Really, we just aim to touch on a lot of the newer areas of interest that thermally modified wood is a great fit for. So the first being embodied carbon. As it is a natural wood product being sourced, we're keeping that carbon in the tree and in the lumber. So when you use that for the buildings, it's a great way to get embodied carbon use up in building usage because the wood will act as a carbon sink. And then it keeps the carbon inside of it. So that's ultimately why we want to see more wood products being used, whether it's thermally modified wood or mass timber. This is just a very popular and growing thing that we're focused on as a natural wood product manufacturer. LEED credits are another big one, I'm sure, for many of your projects. So thermally modified wood and arbor wood definitely can contribute to LEED in a number of different ways, as it is just a natural product. The Living Building Challenge. So arbor wood checks a lot of the boxes here, as it is just chemical free. There's nothing really in it. And if you look on our website, you'll find our declare label stating that it is a red list free material. So if you are ever in need of a product that fits a Living Building Challenge, arbor wood is a great option, as well as any thermally modified wood. An HPD, which is essentially a health product declaration, a statement of anything dangerous in the product. And again, in our case, there's really nothing dangerous. I mean, ultimately, we would recommend that you wear a mask to not breathe in the wood dust from cutting or sanding the product. But ultimately, there's really nothing dangerous about the product because it is just natural wood. And then I think there's two more here. Environmental product declaration. We are actively working on our LCA and EPD. So what this will look at is the life from basically cradle to grave of a thermally modified wood product, and looking at its energy usage, its chemicals, and then what can be done with it at the end of its life. And in our case, as long as that product doesn't have any additives in terms of finish or anything that we would want to take a second look at the end of its life, it can be reused. It could be chopped up into wood chips. There's really a number of different uses as long as it stays in its natural state, because it is chemical free and very clean. FSC, we have FSC options for all of our wood products. So we try to manage all of our lumber purchasing and procurement through FSC managed forests, making sure that we have a chain of custody from harvesting through manufacture. So this is another amazing option if you guys are in need of a product that is FSC rated for your next project. And then finally, a newer one that we have actively started a partnership with is called Carbon Smart Wood. And this is essentially wood that has been captured from the waste stream, where it normally would have gone to rot in the landfill and release its carbon. This is when trees are taken down in boulevard ash would be an example, or when a company clear cuts an area to put a new facility up. We're actually taking that lumber and finding a good use for it by thermally modifying it. So we're starting to integrate a lot of carbon smart wood into our manufacturing process in order to keep wood out of the landfill that is really fine fiber. It can be used and put towards a valuable usage. So in summary, just want to note again, thermally modified wood, it's used because it's a stable, durable, sustainable, and a beautiful option. It's more stable and less expensive than tropical woods with a very similar durability. It's a sustainable solution for a natural aesthetic. And remember to ask the right questions when specifying thermally modified wood. As this industry grows, there's a lot of people that are getting into it. And a common saying is, anybody can cook wood and make it brown, but really there's a lot of detailed and delicate recipes to make sure that the wood is going to be actually able to perform at the end of its or throughout its whole lifetime. And I think that is it. So we're looking pretty good on time in terms of questions.
All right, awesome. Yeah, we definitely have some questions. So if it sounds good, I'll just kind of start at the top and we'll work our way through them.
Sure.
All right, first up, are these treatments applicable to mass timber or engineered timber?
That is a great question and something that we're just starting on. So one thing to note is when thermal modification adds cost to the wood fiber in the manufacturing process. So as of right now, with most mass timber products, you don't necessarily need them to be thermally modified to perform, especially in an interior environment where most of them are being used. But it is something we're exploring if we can get some species that are maybe a little cheaper on the front end, so they don't add a bunch of costs to thermally modify it, and it is going to perform better. There's really no reason why we wouldn't, but for now, the main pushback is probably cost.
Mhm. All right. See, someone asked, will we be getting handouts for this session? Not 100% sure what you mean by handouts. If you're referring to a certificate, you can request a certificate through that form that we sent in the chat. It's the first message in the chat. I'll also copy it and reply it directly to your comment. And if you meant something else, please feel free to chime in the Q&A and let me know. All right. What failures are typically seen after the expected lifespan for thermally modified wood?
That's a great question too. So ultimately, what we've seen in terms of failures is there can still be a little tiny bit of movement. It's very, very rare, but ultimately, what we always recommend is that you get the wood on site and let it acclimate for about 2 weeks, because after thermal modification, the wood still needs to be to adjust to its environment wherever it's going to be finally. That happens in about 2 weeks, and then after that, it's done. So really, the only place we've seen failures is actually at the start, when somebody gets the stuff direct from factory, puts it up right away, and doesn't actually let the wood acclimate, and it moves about, like, we're talking less than a 16th of an inch, very, very tiny, tiny movements, only for the first 2 weeks of its life. So that's where you have to be the most careful on the installation side of things, is making sure you get it, let it just sit out wherever it's going to be installed for a week or two. And then really there should be no issues throughout the life of the product.
Awesome. All right. Do you have thermally modified cedar? And if not, is there a reason?
That's another great question. So cedar is really Mother Nature's best product, which is why it doesn't necessarily make as much sense for us to thermally modify. There would just be very little marginal success in terms of the added stability, added performance of a product like cedar. The reason cedar is so popular and has been so popular is because just by nature, it is a high performing wood. It certainly could be thermally modified. I think again, just going to the time and effort that it takes to create the recipe, it's already performing well, and it is already kind of an expensive fiber. So to just add more cost to it for marginal added performance is not where we want to go. Where we look to is something like a pine or a species that wouldn't normally be used outdoors, and finding a way to make it be used outdoors, because then it's going to be cheaper fiber coming in and adding value to it through the thermal modification process.
All right. How long would the white ash last in mid-Atlantic US states for exterior siding with no stains or oils added after installation and no future maintenance?
So realistically, you can expect 25 years out of an ash product. Really anywhere from a climate change or climate differences, heat of the Arizona desert to the Northeast. We don't see a lot of variation in the life time of the product. What you will see is really just faster weathering from the sun. So If you are in an area that gets a lot of sun, you'll probably see that weathering happen. And the weathering doesn't impact the functional performance of the wood at all. It's really just an aesthetic thing. So the only difference I would say for that is you might see the weathering happen slowly versus very quickly in an area with a lot of sun.
All right, are these woods being used in glulam products?
So we have some people testing glue up projects, whether it's glue lam or just woodworking. What we recommend is any exterior grade wood glue. The only change is, like, as other natural wood products, in an external environment, that wood is going to ultimately probably be the failure of the installation or the product itself, not the wood. So ultimately, we're only as good as the glue products that we have outside. But it is a viable solution for any sort of glue projects.
Got it. All right, and it looks like we had another question about that. Glulam large format lumber, is thermal modification available? So I think we answered that, but if there's anything else you wanted to ask around that, Bonnie, feel free to let us know. All right, where does your production occur?
Great question. So we have two facilities in the US. One is in Bagley, Minnesota, so central part of northern Minnesota. And then St. Joe, Indiana, which is near the Fort Wayne area. Both facilities do pretty much the same thing. It's really just a capacity thing. We have seen immense growth. We've been doing this for about 12 years. And in the last 5 years, we've just seen thermally modified wood and the interest around it take off dramatically, which is very good, and has just led to us to need to get more manufacturing capacity. So 2 locations, both US based. All of our fiber comes from the Northeast, the Southeast, and then the Midwest.
All right, awesome. All right, this person says, I might have missed this, but is the wood thermally modified before or after milled?
Great question. I actually have a few more pieces here. So kiln dried, not thermally modified yet. Thermally modified, and then it is milled into a final piece. So essentially the wood is thermally modified into a rough state, and then the thermally modified board goes through the molder to be milled into siding, decking, dimensional lumber, whatever it's going to be. That is after the thermal modification process.
All right, this might be our last one, so I'll just give a quick notice to anyone else who might have a question. Feel free to submit it now to the Q&A and we'll get to it live. All right, from Brandon, any concerns with using thermally modified products in an open joint rain screen configuration?
Absolutely not. It's one of our most popular installation methods. And we have loads of options in 1x2s, inch thicknesses by 4-inch, 6-inch. So we see a lot of people switching over to an open joint rain screen system.
Awesome. Great. Looks like this is just maybe more of a comment, but someone says, would love to have access to cost comparisons for other modified treatments. So yeah, if there's any further info you want to give on cost comparisons, feel free.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, across the board, one thing that I can comment on just Arborwood specifically being that we are domestic. So because we have domestic sourcing, manufacturing, and sales, we do constantly see that we're quoted underneath a lot of the European competitors because they are a lot of times sourcing fiber in the US, shipping it overseas, modifying it, milling it, and then shipping it back, which just ultimately adds to lead time and cost, and is essentially why we have developed our manufacturing here, so that we can just be quicker to our customers, quicker and closer to the fiber, and ultimately reduce cost and shave that down a little bit.
Awesome. All right, it looks like that might have been our last one. So before we sign off for the day, I just want to give everyone a reminder to grab some of the links from the chat. There are a few links that might be helpful for you there, including getting to Arborwood's page on Acelab. So if you've got follow-up questions that come up after today's webinar, you can reach them directly there. There's also the link to the AIA form and the certificate request form. So if you need to grab that, please grab that now and try to get that submitted before the end of the day. If you have any questions regarding that, you can reach Arborwood directly on Acelab through going to that link that we shared there. Oh, looks like we did have one more question come in. Cost compared to epoxy cementitious boards.
So I am unfamiliar with what that would be. But what I can say, if I'm not accurate in the statement of comparing to like a composite board. So when we look at competitive pricing versus like your Trex or your AZEK, TimberTech, those types of things, typically we're going to be in the same ballpark as them. So it's currently a premium product on most sides, but the exciting thing is we're now experimenting with a lot of different wood sources. Okay, hardy board, gotcha. So yeah, from a hardy board perspective, we're in the same ballpark in terms of pricing, but we are also exploring some different base species and introducing some things like knots and character, what we call it, in order to get our pricing down. Because as of right now, everything that we sell is a clear premium grade, very contemporary look. But one way that we can get our pricing down and make this more of a viable option for more projects is to start to introduce things like some lesser grade species that might have some knots or character in the board. And that's really where we're aiming, is to have really a good, better, best at the end of the day, so we can be an option for more projects.
Awesome. All right, great. Looks like that might have been a last one, but while I just give folks another moment or so to grab those links or let us know if they have any questions, that question just made me realize something else that would be great to show everyone. And if in case you missed the beginning of today's webinar, we did a quick little intro on Acelab, but just wanted to call out one thing that if you're looking for feedback on like comparing hardy board to another type of product or cost comparisons in general, any information that would be helpful to kind of pare down your product research journey. I just wanted to call out this live chat that we have here. So this is staffed by a real person, not by a bot, by people with architectural backgrounds. So if you have any questions that would, be helpful to kind of talk through with somebody, if you're comparing different product types, feel free to use this live chat to get in touch with our team. We've got a bunch of great folks, specification experts, material research experts who are on board to help you. So if you have any questions about, kind of comparing products or trying to evaluate products based on cost or performance for your project, you can always use this live chat to get in touch with Acelab's team. All right, and it looks like we actually did have some other questions pop up. So your lifetimes seem very modest. There are wood windows in the Northeast that have lasted centuries. With proper care and maintenance, why would modified wood windows last indefinitely?
It's a great question, and really it's just a matter of how much time we've had this product for. So seeing that it was developed in the 90s and really has not taken hold till early 2000s, 2010s, we try not to say that it could last longer, but with proper care and maintenance, especially on a hardwood like a ash or walnut, it's very likely that you could get a product to last 50, maybe even 100 years. But we just don't have that data yet.
Right, that makes sense. All right, and then one more, will interior use of the product as a wall siding last longer than 25 years? And if so, how much?
Yeah, and that, again, something that we haven't tested the over 25, 30 years, but just based on the performance and the lack of direct UV, water, weather, rain, those types of things, organic material touching it, it is very likely that anything used indoors will be well over that 30-year mark. Sure.
Okay, all right, and let's see, one more. Do you know if any manufacturers of windows are using your products?
So as of right now, there are no window manufacturers using it, but we're in discussions with a number of them right now as both a interior frame material as well as an exterior actual like viewed frame material.
Cool. All right, and then change of density. Would this treatment make the softwood behave like hardwood?
Great question. So the density doesn't change drastically. So, when you thermally modify a softwood, it doesn't necessarily get it to like a class one. It is going to decrease the size of the wood just a hair. So ultimately the density is going to be increased, but not to a state where it is jumping to a different level of behavior.
Okay, awesome. I think we might have worked through all of them.
Great questions.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you all so much for giving such insightful questions and for coming out today. Really appreciate your attendance and your engagement. If you have any questions that come up as you're leaving the webinar, there's going to be a quick post-event survey. You can feel free to leave any questions or comments there. And any feedback you want to provide for us is super helpful so we can keep bringing you content that is relevant to you. And then you can also, of course, reach out to Arborwood on Acelab with any questions that you might have that come up after today's webinar, or if you want to connect with them about a project. You'll be able to, upload project details, send attachments, and all of that good stuff right through your Acelab portal. So feel free to use those options for any questions that come up after today's event. All right, with that, just thank you again to everyone in the audience. And thank you so much, Andrew, for a wonderful presentation. This was really great.
You bet. Thanks everybody for coming.
All right, have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.